I think I still find it weird that we can tour for like 4 weeks around the UK. It's kind of a strange thing. But no, it's been going good. It's been really positive. The shows have been, I think literally about 95% of them so far have sold out. So it's been nice to get into these clubs and get really up close with people and share the vibe with the bands that we're bringing out with us as well. We didn't have any expectations for this record. We just kind of wrote it, let it all pour out of us and recorded it in a very, I guess, more streamlined way without any fuss or bother or any kind of ridiculous kind of production vibes. It was just rough and ready, and I guess we felt that's the kind of band that we're best served to be. We've always kind of felt the energy of the songs were, really important to us, and to capture those as accurately as possible. And I feel Conduit has pretty much done that. And I think it's the first time I've been really, really overly pleased with the record in a long time in terms that, I could pick any song off this record and play it and, throw it into a set list and be totally comfortable with it, where I couldn't probably say that about all of our records. And it feels like this is the kind of record that we would have made, I think, after our first record if we were left to be without any bother from major label or industry types and stuff. So it's kind of nice to kind of get back to the core essence of, I guess, the idea of what we wanted to get out of this band in the first place. I have to remind a lot of people about this, that we started out as a hardcore, within the South Wales hardcore scene, and that music predominantly has never left my senses, or my lifestyle has always revolved around hardcore and punk rock through even through all of For a Friend's existence. And I couldn't say that for every member of the band that's been in there now, but currently with the way things are with the lineup, everybody seems to be on the same page and driving for the same thing, which is just to play music that we can enjoy writing and recording and getting off to and playing live. We're quite happy to have left the major label situation behind, and people are trying to kind of persuade you to do things and suggest to you that this is how things should be done. And in matter of fact, I don't think it really kind of matters. As long as you kind of can stand behind what you do and have fun doing it, then that's the important thing. And right now, I think we've gotten back onto that track and are able to do that. And it's the most fun, I think, and the happiest I've ever been in this band throughout the entire, I guess, 11-year period. For us, it feels like there's no stress, there's no expectations other than just playing music together. We're communicating better as a band, which is amazing for us. I know I can realize how bad we were communicating with the other guys in the band and how different we were as people. We're now, to Chris and myself and Gav, Rich and Pat, we're all have very similar musical influences and drives and goals, and it's very simple, which makes life being in this band a hell of a lot easier. Well, my favourites are, I think Death Comes to Us All is my favourite one, simply because it's the first time since our very first EP that I've managed to squeeze an entire song lyrically out of Chris to collaborate with. When I first joined the band, Chris was pretty much the driving force behind everything. He'd had lyrics and stuff, and I've always admired his poetic prose and his ability to kind of turn a phrase. And I really, really kind of kicked his ass on this record to kind of bring some stuff to the table for a change. And I love kind of getting into the meat of his words as well. And he's such a talented dude, and I really enjoy kind of singing that song and getting into it and relating to it. It's probably my personal favorite song on the record. The biggest component of what's helped shape this record is probably a hell of a lot of American hardcore and punk rock. As simple as that, it's just basically us going back to our record collections and the music that kind of drove us to be in this band. And I guess a determination to prove that aggressive music isn't immature. I think I've read a lot of things lately, I think, of people who probably got into us through our more accessible records and more mainstream records, so to speak, saying that, I wish they go back to singing, obviously, because screaming is more, it seems childish. And, I have a real issue with that, because a lot of my favorite bands are like super aggressive, like heavy bands. Like, I don't know if you've heard of a band called Converge before, but bands like that really are majorly inspirational for me, because I think they push the boundaries of aggressive music further and further and further. And I want to kind of put a stamp on that for this band, to tell people that, we're going to play the music that we love to play, and we don't consider it a cop-out or a sellout or anything because we want to do that or go back to that kind of style, because it's where we came from, it's where we feel comfortable, and it's how we can express ideas that are, I guess, important to us, and, you know, whether it's political or social or anything to do with that, you know. We're not a lovey-dovey kind of boy meets girl kind of, you know, song band. So we want to kick that idea of what we are to the curb and plow on. I still find it interesting when people hold Casually Dressed Up as this like heavy record, which, you know, if I played them a bloody At the Gates record next to it, like, you know what I mean, they'd see that it isn't aggressive. I guess it's emotionally, you know, heavy record in certain ways, but sonically, I don't think it's like, you know, as heavy as people make it out to be, especially compared to Conduit. I think Conduit really is a very ferocious record from start to finish. But we know we're not into nostalgia as such, and, you know, I love what that record's done for us. You know, it opens doors for us, you know what I mean, which I never would have expected to, and it's given us experiences that have literally kind of informed who we are as people and our music and our interpretation of everything and the way we do things even. You know, we've had a lot of bands kind of like over the years kind of obviously we've played with a lot of bands, and we messaged by a lot of bands who've just said like how important our record was to them in giving them almost like a license to be able to kind of to do something and be able to kind of make music, and which is mind blowing in itself. You know, we never even thought that anything that we did would be considered in that way. Yeah. Which is why we're not like, you know, we don't like to trash our kind of legacy, so to speak, but we're very careful about how we kind of present it. And, you know, like I said, it's quite easy to kind of to fall into the trap of being in a nostalgia band and play just those records, especially because this year is the 10-year anniversary of it. And you know, we've been asked already, are you guys going to do a tour playing the whole thing from start to finish? And we're like, no. I think there's a fine line between a celebration and making money, and I think, you know, a band, I think, you know what I mean, it's like, in this day and age, you know what I mean, bands, if you are going to make money off it, then, you know, all power to them, because, hey, there's very little money to be made elsewhere in the music industry right now. And, you know, but we've been asked, and we said no, because when Darren left the band a couple of years ago, we did 2 shows, and we played the whole thing from start to finish for him as a send-off. More for him, really, you know what I mean, because, you know, that record is pretty much, you know, a defining point for him in terms of, you know, highlights his kind of, you know, thing with the band. And you know, we're not interested in kind of, you know, doing it again. You know, you've got to kind of put your best foot forward. And we spent many years with new records kind of being a bit wary about what we do. And sometimes we'd play a new song here and there, and we'd just kind of stop playing it after a couple of shows because we'd be more fixated on how the audience are getting into it rather than how we get into it. And I often found that really upsetting that we used to throw songs away, like, out of the set list so quickly. And I'd always have an argument with the older members, previous members of the band about that. But right now it's like we're all just sit down and talking about, okay, we'll play this one. You can have a circle pit in this one. We can throw down in this one. We can run around like idiots in this one. And that's the whole, like, that's the vibe. You know what I mean? We want to have fun on this tour and with this band. And I think we're doing a damn good job of making it an enjoyable experience for us and hopefully for the people who come to see us. We try to bring a sense of family to our shows, and we try to make people belong. And I don't want to, like, you know, I'm coming from the hardcore scene and stuff, you know what I mean? I grew up with the whole thing of, like, the messages of unity and stuff, and I saw hardcore take on this whole clique kind of attitude where if you didn't dress a particular way, then you weren't allowed. And that kind of always bothered me. And particularly where I grew up, you know, there was no hardcore scene where I grew up. I had to travel miles and miles and miles to find my nearest one and go to shows. So, you know, I always felt like an outsider even within my own kind of so-called community. So I find it kind of my calling to a degree to kind of make people feel like they belong.